Week 9 was tough, no denying it, some brutal injuries, but I've got 12 players that you should be looking at on waivers this week, and nearly all of them are rostered in under 30% of leagues. Let's get into it. Firstly, the teams on a bye for Week 10 are the Cincinnati Bengals, the Dallas Cowboys, Kansas City Chiefs, and the Tennessee Titans. So there's some big fantasy relevant names we're going to be missing. Let's start wide receiver position with Parker Washington, just 18% rostered. He's become the primary slot receiver for the Jags, particularly with Travis Hunter out. We've seen him have 19 targets over the last 2 games. He went 8 for 90 this week. And I think you've got to think back to like when Trevor Lawrence was thrown to Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, those guys near the line of scrimmage, who he was quite happy to check the ball down to. It's not happening with Brian Thomas Jr. right now. And we've seen Parker Washington have over 50 yards in both of his last 2 games. Next week, it is the Texans, which isn't a great matchup on paper. But Parker Washington's playing in the slot. He's not having to worry about the tough cornerbacks on the perimeters. You can also go and check for Dyami Brown. He's just 4% rostered, much more volatile being the deep threat. But when he hits, he's going to hit in a much bigger way. It's just tricky, and knowing that he's going to go up against Derek Stingley next week might not be the week to play him. But if Brian Thomas is out for any period of time, then Dyami Brown is worth a pickup. Moving over to quarterback position, and let's talk about Marcus Mariota, just 5% rostered. Jaden Daniels out indefinitely with that dislocated elbow that happened deep into the game against the Seahawks. Really not a pretty injury, and definitely not been a pretty season for Jaden Daniels, who struggled with a bunch of stuff. But Marcus Mariota, we've seen him in 3 starts, 3 full games, finished as the QB6, the QB17, and the QB19. So not incredible, but if you're looking for a streamer, this is the territory we're in. He had 4 touchdowns, as well as a rushing touchdown, 3 interceptions, and crucially for us in fantasy, he was over 28 rushing yards in all of them. You're not going to be able to play Marcus Mariota every week, but against the Detroit Lions, who've had trouble covering dual threat quarterbacks at times, I don't mind playing Mariota. Smash that subscribe button. We got weekly waiver content as well as Rich's Dynasty buys and sells. All our tiers, rankings videos come out later on in the week. And of course, Tyler is absolutely crushing it with the pick'em content. Colston Loveland, 23% rostered. Look, I don't want to take a victory lap every time I get a right call, but Colston Loveland was always going to go off against the Bengals. The Bengals are the worst defense against the tight end position, and it's not even close. But next week, Colston Loveland has another good matchup against the Giants, who allow 15th most fantasy points to the tight end position. And we've just really seen Loveland start to take over this role from Cole Kmet. Kmet played 19 snaps on the first 3 drives compared to Loveland's 18. But when Kmet was out there, they were running the ball. When Loveland was out there, they were passing the ball. And then we see Cole Kmet leave the game on the 4th drive. Banged up, also had a concussion. Good chance that he's going to miss next week. And from then onwards, Colston Loveland played 46 of a possible 52 snaps from the 4th drive until the end of the game, according to PFF. He had 118 yards, 2 touchdowns. Now, it's completely fair to point out that to this point in the season, Colston Loveland hadn't really done it. He only had 116 receiving yards before the game yesterday. But Colston Loveland has been slowly trending up. The touchdowns, like winning that game in such a massive moment, Caleb Williams having the confidence to throw to him at that point. I'm really confident that Colston Loveland's going to have a nice second half of the season. Another one we got to talk about from an injury perspective, Luke Musgrave, 0% rostered. It sounds very much like Tucker Kraft is going to miss the rest of the season with an ACL injury, and you just simply hate to see it because we were seeing a tight end really ascend up to the top tier. Musgrave caught 3 passes for 34 yards at that point, and he took over as the main receiving tight end after Kraft left. He played 23 of 29 snaps from that point onwards. And the way they were using him, it was obvious that he is the pass catcher. He was playing in 11 personnel. He was playing more than John Fitzpatrick, who really he's more of a blocking tight end and more of a guy you want as your second tight end on the field. Now, Luke Musgrave just isn't as good a player as Tucker Kraft. We've seen that. Tucker Kraft took the tight end 1 job, but we've seen Luke Musgrave be useful at certain points. Now, next week, he plays against the Eagles, who allow the 3rd fewest tight end fantasy points. So it's not necessarily a plug-and-play one from day one. But if you're in a deeper league and you need to stash somebody for further down the line, then Luke Musgrave is worth picking up. Speaking of the Packers, Christian Watson, just 29% rostered. Now, against the Eagles, it might be a bit easier for Christian Watson to have some fantasy relevancy because we've seen them struggle against the pass at times this year. Now, Matthew Golden left with a shoulder injury, which opens up even more snaps if he's unable to play next week. We've seen Christian Watson since he came back last week. He had 85 yards on 4 targets last week, 58 on 4 targets this week. It's not a high floor that we're playing with, but if you need to shoot for upside, if you're playing in leagues with 2 or 3 flex spots, then Christian Watson's the kind of guy I think is more relevant for those leagues. While you're here, if you haven't already checked out Underdog, you need to go and sign up right now using promo code Sanctuary. They will give you $100 in bonus funds when you play just $5. Devin Singletary, just 5% rostered. We talked about it last week. He was likely to get some run with Tyrone Tracy being the RB1. They obviously don't trust Tyrone Tracy to take everything. We saw that. Like, Devin Singletary led the Giants in carries. He had 8 for 43 on the ground, 5.3 yards per carry, compared to Tyrone Tracy at 3.6. Like, that's a pretty noteworthy difference. He also had 32 snaps to 25 for Tyrone Tracy. They split the third down work with more going to Tyrone Tracy. Tracy had 6 to Singletary's 3. But you'd expect that. Tyrone Tracy used to be a wide receiver in college. We expect him to be able to do more in the receiving game than somebody like Devin Singletary. But Devin Singletary's getting all the early down work, and he crucially is getting the goal line work. So look, Devin Singletary, we know that the ceiling's probably a little low, but if you need somebody to cover, then I would be rostering Devin Singletary absolutely everywhere. Alec Pierce, 26% rostered. 115 receiving yards, led the team in targets with 13, caught 6 of them. And look, that doesn't sound amazing, but when you think about the fact that his average depth of target is over 20 yards, it's ridiculous, really, that he's even coming down with the amount he is. And when he catches the ball, it's such a high value catch straight away that it's easy for him to accumulate yardage. He's had 28 targets in his last 3 games. He's been over 65 yards in each of them. He's averaging almost 11 PPR points this season, which is wild when you consider the fact that he's yet to score a touchdown. Danny Dimes just absolutely loves throwing to Alec Pierce. Yes, it was a rough day against the Steelers. Yes, they confused Danny Dimes a lot, but I'm willing to go back to the well. This team's been excellent all year, and I'm not ready to say the wheels are falling off completely. Tory Horton, 5% rostered, caught all 4 of his targets for 48 yards and a touchdown. Now, I'm a little wary of Tory Horton. I think that we have to make this ad with a little bit of trepidation, because when Cooper Kupp's healthy, Tory Horton hadn't been playing in 2 wide receiver sets. We need guys who are on the field, preferably in 2 wide receiver sets, to be comfortable starting them in fantasy every week. But 4 catches, that's a season high for Tory Horton. This was also the first time he's gone over 40 yards. Sam Darnold obviously trusts him, like he's gone to him in a few big plays across the season already. And I'm willing to pick up Tory Horton off waivers, not go crazy with how much I spend on him, but stash him in case he just starts taking over from Cooper Kupp. Because let's be fair, Cooper Kupp has looked washed all season, all of last season, and it wouldn't be surprising if the Seahawks, needing a little more juice, start using Tory Horton more consistently on 2 wide receiver sets. We've got a few more players that we're going to get to. These are more streamers rather than guys I think that we can consider every single week. If you got fantasy questions, drop them in the comments below. I will answer 100% of them. Troy Franklin, the most rostered player in this video at 48%. Now, I try to stay away from the guys rostered this much, but I've been banging the drum for Troy Franklin for a little while now, and he played consistently on 2 wide receiver sets with Marvin Mims out due to his concussion. But Troy Franklin also has just been incredibly reliable. The gap between him and Cortland Sutton this year, it really isn't that big in terms of targets, when they're getting their targets, how they're getting their targets. The red zone looks that Troy Franklin's getting. He's had 28 targets in his last 3 games. Cortland Sutton's at 22. Now, next week, they play the Raiders, who've been pretty hopeless all season. I think that that's one where you can look to start him immediately, because the Raiders have given up the 8th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. JJ McCarthy going up against the Ravens. Thankfully for him, it's at home, which should make him a little more comfortable. He is 26% rostered. Not a perfect day yesterday against the Lions, 14 for 25, resulting in 143 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Also added 9 rush attempts for 12 yards and a touchdown on the ground. So just little glimpses of what we hoped for this offseason. We were quite high on JJ McCarthy. We thought the rushing floor would definitely be helpful. It would be nice to see that yardage tick up closer to 30 yards or so. But I think he's still worth considering if you need a streamer for next week. The Ravens defense is dramatically improving since they moved Kyle Hamilton nearer to the line of scrimmage. But they still allowed Tua last week his second highest yardage of the season at 261 yards. So they're not perfect. They don't have much in the way of a pass rush. And if you give JJ McCarthy a little time to make his decisions, I think that he can be plenty good enough against this Ravens defense to get the ball to the guys that are so fantasy worthy in Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hockenson. Ollie Gordon against the Bills. The Bills' biggest weakness, it's physical runners. They don't want to deal with physical runners. They would rather be in other defensive looks than that. And Ollie Gordon is the big smash mouth back that the Dolphins need to be able to rely on. He had a rough game against Baltimore. The false tripping call was really awful, and that seemed to just throw him out of his groove. But it was only the week before where against the Falcons, he had 10 for 46 and a touchdown. And I think that Ollie Gordon could have some value here, more if you're in deeper leagues than if you're in just start 2 running back formats. Hit the subscribe button because Rich will be back tomorrow with Dynasty buys and sells.